Welcome to the Multiply Your Success podcast, where each week we help growth-minded entrepreneurs and franchise leaders take the next step in their expansion journey. I'm your host, Tom Dufour, CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team, and as we open today, I'm wondering what you do when you have a conflict at your company, and how do you handle that conflict and have that difficult conversation? Or dare I ask, do you have that difficult conversation? Well, our guest today is Dan Tocchini, and he shares with us some best practices for having those difficult conversations. Now, Dan has been helping leaders bring some magic onto their teams for over 35 years. He has worked with executive teams from Interstate Batteries and ESPN to Smarty Vitamins and Impulse Space, as well as nonprofits like Homeboy Industries and Defy Ventures. Dan gives a no-fluff approach by helping transform leadership teams without any pixie dust, just courageous leadership, creative conflict resolution, and relevant restructuring. No conversations too difficult, no situation too conflicted, because a leader with a vision cannot be held hostage by circumstance or history. I think that's a great bio and intro on Dan. You're going to love this interview as he shares some insights onto these difficult conversations. So let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Io sono Daniele Luigi Tocchini. I'm Dan Tocchini, and I am a founder and partner, senior partner at Take New Ground. Partners, Take New Ground, it's a consultancy. We do a lot of work with mergers, acquisitions, turnarounds. We don't do a lot of one-offs, although we've done some, one-offs like, let's do a team meeting, that kind of thing. What we're hired to do is come in and work with a team in resolving a problem. And we scope it, we work with the team to strategize it, and then we stay with the team. Usually 2 or 3 of our principal partners are on the ground with them, and we work through it until the end, till we get that thing solved.
Pre-show, we were talking about this idea of conflict being the yellow brick road to success. And that's a talking point you have, and it really stood out to me. So I like this. You have these problems that you're helping to address with your customers and clients that you serve. So why is conflict the yellow brick road to success?
I've been around for a while. I'm sure it shows. I've had some wear and tear. I've found that what you don't face will eventually defeat you. And that's so if I look at some of the deals that we've done, some of the turnarounds that we've done, or some of the implementations that we've done, an organization might not be prepared for what they want to do, a leadership team, a board, et cetera. I can usually tell because they're avoiding difficult issues. They're creating workarounds. They're compromising their mission, mission leak, or they're restricting it, or they're afraid of losing something. So they don't want to deal with it. They think if they put it off, eventually it'll resolve itself. And what usually happens is it gets worse and it costs a lot more. You pay now or you pay later with penalties and interest.
I know this is a little self-serving comment, but at the same time, it's the same thing we tell our clients. When they go through the franchise process, you can hire a quality organization like us to help you out and help keep your road to getting there more narrow. And yeah, you have to pay a little bit more now, but it's going to be way less expensive than what you bump into in the long run. That's exactly right.
And I've paid that price myself a number of times where I just haven't been willing to deal with certain issues, or I didn't want to really focus enough on what was wanted and needed to have the necessary conversations to reveal where the resources were or weren't. That's what I mean. So better to find out early if you can. Timing is, I'm not saying you just go blundering into it. So there's some nuances to this. But obviously, people get stuck. I know I have multiple times. And it could be stuck on a good thing, like things could be taking off and you're rolling, and then something comes up and you're afraid it's going to deteriorate or stop the momentum, when in fact that if you slow down and handle it, it may take it exponentially to the next level. And at the very least, it's going to solidify your foundation.
I really appreciate what you're sharing. And getting back to this conflict, the yellow brick road to success, and I understand what you said there, I'd love for you to maybe dig into some nuances of that. For someone who tunes in and says, okay, Dan, well, I get that, but if I have to address this with and I'm sure you've heard these, I've got a key employee or I've got some staff decisions I have to make. A lot of times I would imagine it's human resource related with people and staff and relationships especially in small businesses, or maybe having to no longer invest in a new business opportunity or something. So, what have you seen maybe be some challenges or the resistors, why maybe some of your clients have a hard time with it, or some best practices you found in starting to implement some of these types of ideas?
I think the number one thing I listen for when I sit with a client is I'm listening, or one of my own team members. It doesn't matter, and we're working together to accomplish something. And what I'm listening, when I hear in myself or in anybody else a complaint, particularly a chronic complaint, I know that there's some possibility there, right? Because why do you complain? You complain because you want something that you don't have. And it's usually something bigger. It's the next level. It's what's wanted and needed to get to the next level, or to have something happen or to resolve something, any one of those. And you don't think it's going to happen. And you're afraid to take the risk. You may not even know how to approach it or open it up. So you complain about it. And what happens is, what I've noticed is when people start to complain about something, they begin to pull back from what's wanted and needed, and they settle for whatever they can get. And there's a sense of, if you will, disappointment, or they start to lose some of the passion of the love of what they're doing. They start to wane from their fascination. A complaint is an indicator that somebody is distracted because they don't think they can get what they want. And fascination, to me, is the true mother of innovation. If somebody's fascinated, even if it's a problem, the more you get fascinated with it, the closer you get to it, the more resource you'll start to break down. But if you don't think you can get that resolved, then you won't want to get close to it, right? And so there's a tension there. And it's very subtle. You can pick it up because you'll find yourself complaining to your partner or to your manager or somebody. You'll hear them complaining, and you both agreeing because you're both afraid that if you did it, somehow you might lose something you have now. And that's usually the beginning. That's where the possibility is, because there's some conflict or potential conflict, some potential upset that people are afraid to engage because they don't think they can get to the other side of it.
I find that fascinating. It's interesting. I love that you use that word to find something fascinating, right? To be intrigued and really pursue that. I've shared this before on other interviews, but the podcast for me has always been just a quest of why I always love interviewing. This has just been a personal quest. I love learning all of these new things and intaking from so many people who have so many experiences. I only have one lifetime that I get to live, but if I can learn little pieces from everyone else and get a chance to share that with others, a nugget of info here or there, that could be meaningful.
Tony Robbins, I really enjoyed his podcast. I enjoy whatever he does. But I remember listening to him back in the 80s, man. He was interviewing all these successful people for that reason. He was interested, and he would get really detailed, and you could tell. I always got a lot out of his whatever he did. But same type of thing. I know I enjoy it too. I love if you get on a plane, get connected to somebody, and you get into how they got successful and what they had to navigate. It's really revealing and valuable. At least it has been for me.
Okay, so now we've got this complaining going on. It's generally probably for most of the people tuning in, it's the owner, it's the leader of the organization. There's something going on and they're griping to their wife or their husband, or something's going on, right? A key manager. Now they're at this point and they can either keep complaining and they kind of go along with it. I'm thinking in my head, I've got this thing that's going on right now. How do I start to make a transition to stop just complaining and now start doing something?
Well, okay, good question. All right, naturally go. But yeah, this is more of a self-confession. These are the things I do with others I've had to face in myself, right? And I get very acquainted with them because the earlier you can catch it, the greater the advance, quicker it goes, and the less the price is. But yeah, so here you have this complaint. Now, most people don't like what I'm going to talk about. So if you're listening, brace your ears, because every time I talk to an entrepreneur or a partner or whatever, we start to get into it, particularly a young partner who's just coming on board. The only way to break through that, the best way to break through that is, one, you got to ask yourself, what do I get from this complaint? And the way to get to that is to notice what your behavior is when the complaint comes up. Like, do you shut down? Do you pull back? Do you attack? Whatever it is, you'll notice there's a pattern that repeats itself that makes you right about staying in the complaint. And if you can know what that is, if you can start to see that, you can see what you're getting out of it. Like, for instance, if you're a big producer on my team, but let's say you're not a team player and you're actually upsetting the support team, or maybe you're in sales and you're really good, but you treat the support team poorly. You don't like doing follow-up or whatever it is that you do. And I'm afraid to talk to you about it. The first thing I've got to do is, and I just kind of let you get away with things. And others see that, and they start to, they're going to start talking like, well, Tom's my favorite, and whatever that is. He's Dan's favorite. He's not going to mess with the golden egg, the golden goose who lays the eggs. So I've got to come to terms with what I get out of that. And obviously I get you continue to produce, which is probably the payoff. And I also get the relief from any discomfort that I might have to face with you, et cetera. There's a number of payoffs. But what I've got to do is sit down and ask myself, what's the long-term impact? What is going to happen if I continue doing this? What's the parade of horribles I'm going to be dealing with? Probably more turnover on the team. There's going to be complaints. People are going to think the way to get by is what you're doing. And if they start to produce, they may silo themselves. And, it becomes a quagmire of multiple related issues that fall off of it. And if I stop and look at that, my motivation for having the conversation will come up. So I've got to see what the future is going to look like if I don't correct it. And I spend a lot of time, because a lot of people go, well, we got to talk vision. Definitely, you got to have a vision. Now, and you also have to understand what the price you pay if you don't, or if you're not really true to that vision, if you're not in touch with the holistic nature of that vision, you're going to end up, it's going to be a lot more expensive than you thought. So better to get in touch with that early than late. And that's the first thing, because leadership begins with self-leadership, with managing myself. Then if I can manage myself, I'll be able to create a narrative that can invite you into it so we can talk about what we're really doing here. Because if you're not willing to get bigger than just what you're doing, then you're really ultimately going to be undermining the process with the team. And you got to really, that's a delicate, but it's a very subtle and important conversation. And there's ways to prepare for that. I have all kinds of frameworks, but you got to identify it first.
I actually was going to ask how you might prepare for a difficult conversation. And there might be different preparation depending on what you're doing, but can you talk through a few of those?
Absolutely. First off, you got to be able, number one, to be clear about, and what I do is I sit down and say, what do I want ultimately? What is the big win if I could get it out of this conversation? What will it look like if I really succeed? What's it look like on the other side? And I describe it. Number two, what's the issue? Articulating the issue in a very succinct way is about 9/10 of the problem. Here's what I think the issue is, Tom. I notice when you win, the rest, you don't tend to share or celebrate with the team. You tend to be isolated and in many ways detached from the rest of us or whatever, something like that. But you want to get as specific as you can. And I write it down and I'll work it a few times. I put it through GPT to get that thing really clear, because if you can get that statement clear, it lets the person know what you want to talk about. Two, I want to provide three, actually. I want to provide, so you want to know what you want to get on the outcome. You want to be able to state the problem. And then you want to give them an example of what the problem looks like to you. When you blah, blah, blah. Remember the other day when you blah, 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 and this, blah, blah. This is what it looks like. When this happens, you tell them that. Then number four is, when this happens, this is what happens for me. This is what I see happening for the team. This is what is going. This is what goes on, right? So my point to the person might be, I'm really open-handed. I'm exploring this because it is a concern of mine. I'm open to the fact that I may not have it clear, but I do want to communicate clearly what I see it is. And I'm not going to just get off it because I'm afraid of losing you, but I want to get clear. Now, if I see there's something I can learn in there, I'm going to move. But this opens it up, right? So this is what I think's going to happen, right? And coming down the road. And this is what I experience when I see it. And then the next one is, here's how I've contributed to this problem. Here's what I see I've been doing that's actually contributed to the breakdown, so that I see, and that's why I'm having this conversation. One of the things maybe I haven't been doing is talking to you about what's going on in my head and about what is wanted and needed to really, have this go to the next level, have our team go to the next level or whatever, accomplish this or have this to stop happening, whatever that is. And then when I show them that, I'm going to say, look, here's what I'm committed to. I'm committed to blah, blah, blah. You working well with a team, you being able to resource the team being able to learn from you, you elevating yourself not only as a performer, but as a leader, et cetera, et cetera. And that doesn't mean you have to do anymore. It just means that you're thinking about your impact on the team, something like that. And here's how I'm committed to you. I'm committed to learning from this as well as exploring it with you so I can learn, but also so you can learn and the team can learn how to bring this about, whatever, right? So I prepare all that before I go into the conversation, because the conversation is going to be more dynamic than that list. But that list helps me, A, stop being reactive, B, listen and learn, C, have a truing mechanism to come back to the conversation if it goes off on some, rabbit trail. And I'm out here and I'm going to come, well, this is why we're talking, right? So it gives me a lot of context to stay in. So I'm not as reactive. I can be much more supportive of the person there, and I can be clear about what's next. That opens up a ton of resource.
Thinking about it as you're describing this, when would you look to have these conversations? I mean, is this a quarterly review, an annual review? I mean, what kind of cadence do you look at for these kinds of things?
Whenever they come up. So I don't just stop business, but if I see something, I want to catch it. Some of the biggest mistakes I've made is seeing something early and then letting it fester. And then I have much more to deal with 2-3 weeks down the road. If I see something, I'm going to start preparing to have the conversation. I'm going to watch and I'm going to gather information, and because I don't want to, I'm not trying to gotcha. I'm not trying to get them. I am, but I do want to give them something concrete from my experience that they can look at, put their hands on. I too can, and we can explore, because there's always more than I can see. I want to be curious about it. At the same time, I want to be authentic about what's really going on and the concern I have about the ultimate goal and mission of what we're up to. So those are things that I'm communicating that with them. I'm creating a narrative, a context, a story, if you will, that they can join with me shoulder to shoulder. I want to what I'm really committed to is I'm working not to get polarized. I want to be shoulder to shoulder. And then if it gets to be where they're obstinate or there's, well, that's okay. I missed it somewhere down the road. That's usually a price I pay down the road. The earlier you can get to a breakdown, the more cooperative people tend to be. The more they get entrenched, your tacit consent is what's received in your silence. If I'm silent and I don't say anything about something that's really starting to gnaw at me, I'm actually agreeing with what's going on tacitly. And they're going to feel betrayed if they get down the road and then all of a sudden I hit them with a, cement bag of, upset, smack. And they're going to go, well, why didn't you say something earlier? What's this about, right? And that adds a whole new layer to the breakdown.
As you're explaining this and I'm thinking about it, it makes me think about, okay, well, a lot of this gets to creating a culture of these kinds of conversations. So I'd love for you to just maybe talk through not just the individual leader or business owner making these changes, but actually creating a culture. What are some of the reasons why this type of culture maybe doesn't change or has a challenge in doing that?
That's one of our work is, in fact, I used to have a consultancy called Culture ROI, because it's really a cultural stand where when I'm onboarding people, et cetera, I'm having these kinds of conversations. And then I'm following up like that with my team, and my team's doing it. And I've just found that when people there's a certain sacred nature to leadership. I investigate that with people because, one, if you're going to lead, you're going to impact people's lives. Two, it's sacred because it's service to others. You're willing to serve others, something bigger than yourself, because you get the inherent intrinsic value of standing with people that way. Two, it's a perpetual aligning of yourself and others with the purpose and mission of what you're up to. And it's listening to them because often they'll contribute to the narrative in very powerful ways. Or if they have some upset, you may learn ways to articulate what you're up to, in new frameworks and you may learn something that can help you reach more people on your team. It requires an authentic connection, but you got to really care about what you're doing. And it's deeply relational because you realize, that you're impacting people. They're spending a third to 40% of their life with you and the team. So this is an opportunity to really let them know how much you appreciate them by the willingness to have these kinds of conversations. And then, you're taking responsibility for the legacy of your business on top of it, for like if I do this on an ongoing basis and the organization is steeped in it, then when I step back, people take hold, or if I need time off or whatever, they're going to be congruent and they'll be self-managing and they'll be able to resolve issues. I'll be able to decentralize power to a greater degree, et cetera. And for me, it's a moral or ethical compass because I want to be treated that way. I want to be, nobody wants to be a widget or a tool in a shop, right? You want to be a contributor. And there's a lot of innovation in the team that you never even thought of. At least I've discovered that. And to me, that's a force multiplier in my business and the experience of value and meaning in my work.
If someone's tuning in and say, boy, I really like what Dan's been saying, this is interesting, I'd like to get in touch with him, how can someone find out a little bit more about what you're doing or connect with you?
The best way is to go to takenewground.com. That's our website. You can reach out to us there, or you can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Dan Tocchini. Those are probably the two easiest ways to get a hold of me.
Thank you. Well, Dan, this is a great time in the show. We ask every guest the same 4 questions before they go. And the first question we ask is, have you had a miss or two on your journey and something you learned from it?
Oh, man, more than a miss or two. One of the things I learned a long time ago is I can't do this alone. I'm a pretty hard-charging A-type personality. I've always been good at whatever I do. I was an All-American football player and baseball, basketball. It seems like whatever I put my mind to, I tend to do well. And at a young age, I think till in my mid 30s, I was maybe early 40s even. If something wasn't getting done, I'd just pick it up and do it. And I started feeling pretty alone because really strong people who could really be a resource and a benefit in my life, in my development, started leaving. And I spent some time really looking at that and getting feedback. And I realized the team, I'm really good at attracting a team, but then I'd use them and they turn into tools. And that was because I saw myself as a tool often. Like my identity was in my competency. And as I went along, I started realizing there was a lot more to me, a lot more to the people that I was working with, and a lot more available in the mission that we were working to solve together. So, that's a big deal for me. And I can tell you, there's one specific time I had this guy on my team. He was a big producer, and I got in an argument with him. We're in Hawaii. We were in Kaneohe Bay, and there's a sandbar out there, and it goes up and down. The water goes over it and comes down. And we're playing out there with water, jet skis and so on. We're standing talking in the sun, and he wore a hairpiece, and I just noticed it. I said, "You wear a hairpiece?" He got really mad at me. And I said, "What's up? Why are you so mad? I'm your friend. Don't ever mention that again. Don't ever mention that again." I didn't think anything of it. And it went on and on and on. Eventually, and this guy was pretty much an isolated, he was kind of a rock star. Some of the team was complaining. The thing I described about, the golden child, that, I went through that. I did that. And eventually he ended up committing adultery with his wife with somebody on the team. It, broke the team up, all of this. And I realized in debriefing it that if I had just had the conversation about the hairpiece back then, I would have touched in, even though he was upset. I needed to explain, like, wow, what's up? Like, what are you concerned about? And then when the team came to me about certain things about how he was treating them, rather than going and sitting down and really understanding what was going on there, which I would have found out a lot, I ended up paying with penalties and interest some years later when this whole thing blew up and really tore at the fabric of the company. It was a painful experience.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Dan. And let's talk about, on the other side, a make or a highlight to share.
Well, yeah, absolutely. The team I have now, it's probably the best experience I've had in my life. I love I made a principle. I'm not going to work with somebody that I can stand with. Like, I don't want them, and I'm very careful about that. And I have, my partner, Adrian, is a phenomenal guy. David Cox, you'll see them on the website. Another guy named Mark Edwards. These guys have been very successful in their domains and very successful. Mark ran a $10 billion tech firm. David, was 14 years at McKinsey and Company and ran a number of tech firms himself. Adrian as well, he's coached some great CEOs. And we built a team where we can talk to each other. And one of the big wins, a few years back, we got this very talented guy on the team. One of my partners brought him on, thought he'd be great. I thought he'd be great. Very talented, sharp, good looking, articulate, etc. And one day I'm sitting with him and he says to me, you and I have a special connection that none of these other guys have with you. And immediately I went, now why would he say that? Right? So I noted that. I asked him, I said, why would you say that? He said, say what? I said, that we have a special connection that other people, well, we do. I said, okay, good. Tell me how that is for you. Well, you've been through this and I've been through that, and both of us have, but I don't think these other guys have. I said, yes, but what are you signifying in that? And he got really uncomfortable. He glossed it over. I said, well, you should think about it. Let's talk about it. And about 2 weeks later, he's on the phone arguing with the guy who brought him in. And the argument was very interesting because it was about how he didn't like the way he looked when my partner addressed something with him in private. And he was worried that my partner was going to do that on the team, like he might expose him. And so I heard him talking, and I asked if I could join the conversation. They said, yeah. And we started to delve into it. And it got really clear. And at the end of probably 2 or 3 days of talking about this upset that shouldn't have been that big of a deal, I realized this guy's not going to work on this team. And when we've handled that, we all went, okay, what can we learn from this? Good news is we got this early and we let the guy go, and it was amicable. He got it. He saw the discomfort for himself, but it really, it was amazing because I noticed that our production, our business jumped. All of a sudden, all the partners are producing like they never did. We all kind of chuckled at one of the partner meetings about, wow, once we did this thing just took off. The immediate quarter thereafter. So, and we're talking, 7-figure movement. So it's a big win.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. Let's talk about a multiplier. The name of the show is Multiply Your Success, that you've used to multiply either yourself personally, professionally, or organizations you've run.
What the big multiplier effect for me is breaking down silos. I don't see my personal life I don't see it as I go home and then I'm Dan, the father, grandfather, husband, and Dan, the CEO or partner at work, or Dan, the consultant at a client's. I am Dan, and I don't have a problem. My partners know my family. I know all their families. when my grandson died a couple of years ago, the support I got from my partners was amazing. It wasn't, they knew my family. When they came, they were part, it was like very powerful, very meaningful for me. And when my partners have problems, it's the same way. We were able to share them, time off, no problem. I was gone for 2 months and nothing, didn't miss a beat. You know, they took care of me. It was amazing. I got off the plane, and so one of my partners gave us a car, and we weren't even anticipating that. And another partner rented an Airbnb for my family to spend a month together with my son and his family, so we could mourn through the issues. And they would send me reports of what's going on. It just was really. I told my wife was like moved as well, and she's part of the team. But you don't realize the value of that until it hits you, and a lot of that comes from de-siloing. Like if I'm having an issue in my personal life, I can talk about it. If I'm having an issue in my business life, I can go to my family and get time to do it. Right? It's like an integration, not a work-life balance. It's an integrated work life, and that's a force multiplier for me. I focus on that.
Dan, the final question we ask every guest is, what does success mean to you?
Well, I think I just described it, but first, faith, family, community. Those are the three things that in my life are important, and health. You know, I take care of myself. I love hanging out. I love making a difference in my community. I love making a difference with my family. And so, and with my partners. So those are the things. To me, success is the ability to do that, to commit to something bigger than myself, and to experience the meaning in it. It makes the tough times worth it. It's like it sustains me when you're in a valley and life isn't the way you want it to be, and it's difficult. It makes it worth it getting out of bed because I've got that connection.
Wonderful. Well, as we bring this to a close, Dan, is there anything you were hoping to share or get across that you haven't had a chance to yet?
I say it to myself. It's something I meditate on at times when I'm down. Keep kicking at the indifference until it bleeds life is what comes up in my mind. Like, if this isn't working, don't run away from it. What can I learn from it? How can what's going on here that I'm not paying attention to that I need to? And not to give up on it unless, no, it'll tell you doors will shut. And when they do, you can move on. But, I'm a strong believer in completion. I guess that stay with something like it's not happening to me. It's happening for me. So it's that kind of bumper sticker, but it means a lot to me. It's kind of a bumper sticker. It's not happening to me. It's happening for me. But that's really what has occurred to me. Like, for instance, when I talked about the loss of my grandson, deeply painful, very valuable for my family, deeply bonded me with my friends and family and business partners. And if I would have run from it or hid or alienated people, it just wouldn't have been a wonderful life. It wouldn't have been worth it.
Dan, thank you so much for a fantastic interview. And let's go ahead and jump into today's 3 key takeaways. So takeaway number 1 is when Dan talked about what you do with the complaints that you might have or hear. And he said, the quicker you catch it, the better. And he said, here are a couple things to ask yourself. What do I get from this complaint? And to notice your behavior when the complaint comes through. And as a manager, if you don't talk to the team member about it, that becomes a problem. Which leads us to takeaway number 2, which is how, as a leader, you can have that difficult conversation. And so he gave us a framework or an outline to follow. I thought this outline was fantastic. Step 1 is to decide, what do you ultimately want out of the conversation? What is the big win and what does it look like? Number 2 is state the problem. What's that issue? Articulate the issue to the other person. Number 3, tell them what the problem looks like to you. Number 4, when this problem happens, this is what happens to me, and you describe what happens there. Number 5, here is how I have contributed to the problem. So you're taking some ownership or some responsibility there, that it's not entirely that person's fault. Number 6, here is what I'm going to do about it and what I'm committed to doing. And the final piece here is to prepare this list before you actually go into the meeting. I thought that was a great little nugget and takeaway. Takeaway number 3 is when he described leadership having a sacred nature. And he said it helps you to think of it in this way and think about it. And he gave a few points here about it, why he thinks there's a sacred nature to leadership. He said, you're leading people and you're impacting their lives. You're serving others. You're able to perpetually align your staff and team with your company vision and purpose. It's deeply relational, and you're taking responsibility as the leader for the legacy of your business. I thought that was a great little nugget. And now it's time for today's win-win. So today's win-win is when Dan was talking about these difficult conversations and when is the right time to have these difficult conversations. When do you do it? And the win-win is that he said, you do this as soon as you can. It's easier to do it sooner rather than later. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes and the bigger the problem often becomes. And so the speed to looking to address this and following that outline is likely going to be a big win for you and for your employee, your staff, your team members, those others that need to have that difficult conversation. And as Dan had shared, he failed to have that difficult conversation with one of his key people. And he felt that had he had that difficult conversation at the time and that moment when it happened, it may have prevented a series of unfortunate events that happened several years down the line. And so that's the episode today, folks. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast and give us a review. And remember, if you or anyone you know might be ready to franchise their business or take their franchise company to the next level, please connect with us at bigskyfranchiseteam.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to having you back next week.